Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Shane Kohler here. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that we are approaching the end of July, and now through July 31st, you can save $1,000 on the total cost of tuition of the Inspired Love program. This is my signature program. I have had well over 100 students go through it. The feedback is phenomenal. The results they create for themselves and in their love lives is amazing. And if you want to meet and talk about the program, I would love to get to know you better and share what it's all about. At the link right below wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can book a free discovery call where you and I can sit down and talk and get to know each other a little bit better. Of course, there is no commitment to book a call, but if you're interested and you think that this program could serve you, there is no better time than to take advantage of the special we have right now. And I would love to get to know you and see if we can work together. All right, so go ahead, check that out at the link right below wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thank you for being here today. Lots of love, and I'll talk to you soon. Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler here. Pleasure to be on with you today. As always look forward to jumping in with everybody. Today we're talking about how to make deeper connections in dating and relationships. And I know this is such a need, for all of us, right? Connection is the single greatest thing we can experience in life. I think more than money, more than travel, adventure. All of what we want to experience in life really centers around connection. I hear so many people who make all the money, have all the success, find everything they want in life, but they feel empty because they don't have the level of connection they want. Right. And what is having things in life without having the people that you want to share it with? It's like being able to connect is just a fundamental human need. It's something from the time we're born. Babies reach out for connection, right? Babies who don't receive connection or children who don't receive connection have a lot of issues when they grow up. And I know that's been a lot of us, right? A lot of us didn't receive the connection we needed when we were younger, and we have a lot of issues because of it, right? It's just such a fundamental human need. And as we become adults and as we grow, that need for connection never leaves us, right? It is always there. It is always this thing in our soul that is just craving to be seen, to deeply see others, to love and to be loved, to be held, to receive affection, to be able to share our dreams, to share our hearts, to share our truth with someone, to be seen in that truth, to be accepted and received in that truth. All of this is just so fundamental to what it means to be human. And it's something that we all crave in the deepest levels of our being. And I don't have to tell you this, you probably know this, but we are living in like a connection or a lack of connection epidemic, right? It's amazing how easy it is for us to be in a room full of people and feel completely alone. Right. It's incredible when we look at the world and how many people there are in the world and how many interactions we have. every single day, whether it's on social media, whether it's at your work, whether it's with your friends, whether it's with your family, right? Like even the people who are closest to us, sometimes we feel like it's impossible to really connect with them. I mean, I look at like people in my family sometimes. It's like, these are people that I've known my entire life, and I feel like they just don't understand me, right? Fortunately, I don't feel that way with my wife. I feel like me and my wife have incredible connection, but so many people don't feel connected in their marriages. So many people don't feel connected in their relationship with their boyfriend or girlfriend. So many people who are single and dating are going on lots and lots and lots of dates and meeting lots and lots and lots of people, but never experiencing an authentic connection with anybody. Right? It's like we're meeting all these people, we're on all these chats, we're on social media, we're interacting with people constantly, but never feeling deeply connected to people, and never feeling like we are really seen, never feeling like we are really accepted, never feeling like we are really loved for who we are. So many of us are living in a kind of feeling where we try to be what we think people want us to be, or we try to do what we think people want us to do. And we bend over backwards trying to feel close to people, trying to feel connected to people. And yet it seems like that feeling of connection always eludes us. There's this gap in connection that we need to learn how to bridge. And so many of us don't know how to do that, or don't find ourselves able to do that. We crave connection on the deepest levels, and yet find ourselves coming up constantly empty-handed when it comes to seeking or feeling connection. And so today I want to talk about bridging that connection gap, right? I want to talk about whether you're dating, or if you're on dating apps right now and you're in a bunch of chats with people, and you're feeling like every person I talk to on a dating app, or every date I go on, or people my friends set me up with, or whatever, like it just feels dull. It feels boring. It feels like I'm not, it's not igniting that spark. It's not lighting that fire in my soul. I'm not feeling that connection with people. Or some of you may be in a relationship. Some of you may be with a partner that you've been with for a while and feeling disconnected from that partner, right? Feeling that your partner doesn't really understand you, or your needs aren't really being met, or that, it was great at one point, but it's not really great anymore. And I feel like we had something and then we've lost it. So, a struggle with connection can show up for us in all these different ways. And we can experience that struggle in many, many different ways. But today I want to talk about how to bridge that gap, right? How do we really connect more deeply with people? And I think it's important to start by saying that every single person on the planet craves connection, right? I was just talking about that at the beginning, is that from the time we're babies and children, actually connection is so natural for children. But if we don't get a lot of loving connection as children, we lose that ability, right? If you look at children or even babies, like they reach out, right? They want to be touched. They want to be held. They want to be nurtured. They want to be loved. And, you look at kind of the natural light or the natural joy that children have. And then if we don't get that as children, then we lose that ability. We lose that ability to deeply connect when we don't receive that as children. So much of my work that I do with my clients, whether it's work privately or work inside my Inspired Love program, so many work that I do with clients is really about healing those wounds that happened so long ago when, we were children and we were vulnerable and we reached out for love. We reached out for connection, and that wasn't reciprocated. That wasn't offered us. And then we developed a resistance to vulnerability. We developed a lack of ability to open ourselves up to people, because at a time in our lives when we did, we got deeply hurt and we never wanted to do it again. And that is something we carry in our body. It's something, we carry it in our spirit to a degree, right? And it's just so, it runs so deep, and it gets to the deepest places within us. And that lack of connection is just so painful to feel, that when we reach out for connection and we feel that it's not reciprocated, or we feel that we're not being received in the way we would want to be, we close ourselves off and we don't allow ourselves to connect anymore. And like I said earlier, we're living in a kind of connection epidemic where, everywhere you go, there are people everywhere. And yet most people feel completely alone, right? I mean, it's crazy to think that there are billions of people walking around this world. Everywhere you go, there are people all over the place. And yet most of us feel completely alone, right? Like we don't know how to reach out to our neighbor or reach out to our friend or reach out to that person that we see at the grocery store or whatever, and just be able to have an authentic human connection. And so I want to speak about bridging that connection gap, because it is something that every single person craves, something that every single person wants. And yet we've built up certain barriers around ourselves because of our trauma, because of our wounding. And I often talk about trauma as though trauma is not necessarily some kind of abuse or something that took place. It could definitely be that. But trauma is an open loop. And in terms of the way we're talking about it with connection today, I just want to give you an example. If you were, say you were in school, you're 6, 7, 8 years old, you're in grade school, and there are kids at school that you want to connect with, right? They seem cool, or they seem like fun people, or kids that you want to connect with. And maybe you reached out to those kids to try to be their friend, or, in whatever way you talked to them on the playground, or you invited them to play a game or whatever. And maybe they made fun of you, or maybe they laughed at you, right? Well, we think like, oh, something happened when I was 8 years old. I was 8 years old. It's not a big deal. Well, what actually happens in our consciousness, even around a simple experience like that, is that settles in, and that starts to inform us about who we believe we are. It starts to inform us about what we believe our worthiness is. And of course, if it happened one time when you were 8 years old, it's really not that big of a deal. But the thing is, for most of us, it doesn't just happen one time when we're 8 years old. It happens many times when we're 8 years old. It happens many times when we're 10 years old, when we're 15 years old. It happens many times when we're children in our homes with our parents. It happens in so many different ways throughout our life. And people, whether it's our parents, whether it's the other kids at school, whether it's our teachers, whether it's other people that we were around growing up, we've grown up in a world where it's a hard world, right? I mean, that's just the fact. It's a hard world. People go through a lot of shit in this world, and it doesn't always feel safe to be exposed or to feel vulnerable in this world. And I think that was even more true for our parents than it is for us. Right? Like, I think the world our parents grew up in was even less safe than maybe the world a lot of us are growing up in today. And maybe that's not true for everyone, but I think that's true for a lot of us. And because of that, we have created kind of a collective resistance to vulnerability. We've created these barriers that we carry around. And so to be able to connect is to know how to cut through those barriers that to some degree we are all carrying, right? Those barriers that have been built up throughout our lives. When I was made fun of and bullied in grade school, and then when, I started asking girls to be my girlfriend and they were like, ew, no. Right. Or when my first girlfriend, the first girl I fell in love with in high school, like cheated on me and then blindsided me with it and then mocked me for it. Right. Like, and we go through these woundings in our life and we build up these barriers. And by the time you reach adulthood, I mean, we all have these barriers in some way to some degree. And if you're on a dating app right now and you're talking to people, I mean, I don't have to tell you this, it. Like, if you're on a dating app and you're talking to people, you can feel the barriers that people have up. When people send you those one word, hey, what's up? Right? Or when you're asking someone questions and they're giving you those one word responses. Right? That's not a dull, disinteresting person. That's somebody who's afraid to connect. That's somebody who's afraid to really reveal themselves, right? That's somebody who is afraid to let themselves be exposed. And so they want to connect. They wouldn't be on the app if they didn't want to connect, but they don't know how to connect because so many times in their life, when they have opened themselves up and exposed themselves for connection, they've been hurt as a result of it. And so they're sending you those one-word messages because they don't know if it's safe to interact. And so to be able to connect with someone is to be able to create an environment of safety where people feel like it's safe to open up. And in order to do that, in order to create an environment of safety where people feel like it's safe to open up with you, you have to first bring the courage that shows that like you're okay with opening up. And I know even as I say that, like a lot of people are going to immediately hear that and go, well, why do I have to do it first? Why can't somebody do it for me? Why can't somebody create that space for me? And I always say, like, if you're listening to this conversation right now, you are likely the most conscious person in any relationship you're going to have. Like, that's just the simple truth of it. Like, if you are here right now listening to this conversation, there are so many things you could be doing right now on a Tuesday or on a Wednesday or on a Friday or whenever you're listening to this, right? There are so many things that you could be doing right now. And if you are doing this instead of something else, you are probably the most conscious person in any interaction you're going to have. Because most people are out there watching cat videos or whatever, right? Like, most people are not trying to evolve their consciousness. Most people are trying to numb their consciousness because they feel so disconnected, right? Like, most people are carrying such a heavy wounding that they don't want to dive into a conversation like this and really explore that wounding. They want to just distract themselves from it. They want to just get through another day. And so if you're hearing this right now, the responsibility is yours to open that window of connection, because this is what I want to tell you. No matter who you're talking to right now, that person on the dating app who's giving you one-word responses, your partner of several years who you feel just completely shut down from, no matter who it is that you're dealing with, that person wants to connect as deeply as you do. That person wants the same things that you want in their life, in their love, in their relationships. That person craves it. They really, really do. And they have fear, just like you have fear. When you think about really opening yourself up to someone, when you think about, if I give an example here, like if you were to be on a first date or a second date or a third date with someone, and you were to really share with them, like, I find you very attractive, or I find, this might not be appropriate for a first date, but this might be appropriate for, fifth date or third date, right? Where you were to say to someone, I'm developing a strong interest in you. Like, I really feel like this could go somewhere. Like, I'm really enjoying this interaction. I really want to see where this could go. Right. And if you were to say something like that to someone, like, there is a level of exposing yourself in that. There is a level of making yourself available in that most people are unwilling to do. And this is what I want to say. If you're not willing to do it, the likelihood of you attracting someone who's willing to do it, that's very unlikely. It's just very unlikely. In fact, I will say this for myself, and I'll say this for my wife, because we've both had similar experiences. I'll say this for so many of the clients that I coach, people in my program, is that I had to go through a period of getting comfortable exposing myself like that over and over and over and over and over again, and not necessarily getting the response that I hoped I would get until it changed, until I started to get that response. But there was a period, and I think this is, to a degree, this is how life works, right? There's a kind of spiritual development that's happening here, in that when you are not comfortable opening yourself up, you are not going to attract people who open yourself up. And in fact, part of your curriculum, part of your lesson, part of the personal evolution that you have to go through is to learn to get comfortable opening yourself up and not necessarily getting the response that you're hoping to get. And the more comfortable you can be with that, the more grounded you can be with that, the more confident you can be with that, the more likely you will be to attract that in the future. So there's a willingness to be vulnerable. And I remember someone said to me a long time ago, I was in this training, and we were talking about vulnerability. And, everybody has a fear of vulnerability, right? I mean, in this particular training I did, like, it was a huge breakthrough for me, in that I think for the first time in my life, I opened myself up and was vulnerable. I remember, I'll just share this. There was this exercise that we did in the training. And I just want to say, this is why I think doing personal development work in groups of people is such a powerful method, like more than just reading a book or listening to a podcast or doing like a self-study program, but when you're actually live interacting with groups of people, it is such a more powerful approach because you have that reflection in front of you. You have that, like, I am exposing myself to someone. I am opening myself up. I am making myself emotionally available to people here. And especially when you do that in a safe environment, it can create such a personal transformation. And I remember in this program I was in, I went through an exercise. It was one of the exercises they did in the program where basically I had, up until that point in the program, I had been hiding, right? I had just been like sitting in the back, like not really opening myself up, not really saying anything, not really sharing. I'd been hiding. I'd been like surviving the program, right? And then we did this exercise. It was a feedback exercise where people really, without going into too much detail about exactly how it worked, it like people really let you know how you had shown up for them over the last couple of days. And I just remember realizing that like most of the people in the group didn't even know my name. Many of the people in the group didn't even realize that I was there, right? It's like I had been in this room with these people for 3 days at this point. Like many people were like opening themselves up and pouring their hearts out. And like most of the people in the group didn't even know my name. They didn't even realize that I was there. And that wasn't just a reflection of how I showed up in that group. Like that was a reflection of how I showed up in my whole life, right? That was a reflection of me playing small in my whole life, like holding myself back in my whole life out of this fear of like, if people see me, they're not going to like me. If I reveal myself, I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to get rejected. And look, that came from my past. Like we've all been through these things. We've all been through these experiences that have deeply wounded us, that have caused us to doubt our worthiness, that have caused us to doubt our likability and our lovability, that have caused us to doubt that people actually want us around or like us or care about us, right? Like we've all had these experiences in our lives. And this has caused us to shut down in so many ways. And I was shut down. And what this process in this program revealed to me was how shut down I actually was. And so it hit me so deeply, realizing that I'd been in this room with these people for all these days and that they didn't even know my name. They didn't even realize I was there. And when that really landed for me and when that really hit me, I walked in the next day and I grabbed the microphone first thing in the morning and I was like, I want to introduce myself. And I said to the whole room, I said, I've been living my life as a coward. I've been afraid to just be myself in the world. And, you know, that was a huge turning point in my life. And that carried over outside of the course, outside of the training room, you know, that carried over into my dating life. I mean, I think if I had not done that training at that time, I don't think I ever would have met my wife. Or if I had met someone like her, like, I don't think I would have been able to attract her or able to have the kind of relationship we have. Like, I just was not available in my life in a way where that could happen because I didn't know how to connect with people because I was too afraid to connect. I was too afraid to truly open myself up to people. And so even if I had met someone like my wife, she wouldn't have felt the spark with me. She wouldn't have felt like, oh, this is the kind of man I could marry. She wouldn't have felt that because I was not giving enough of myself to people in my life in order to create that kind of experience in someone else. And this is what I was going to say earlier when I started talking about vulnerability. It was in this training that I was sharing about. We had a conversation about vulnerability. And I remember just the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to open myself up was such a huge breakthrough for me. And when we were talking about vulnerability, someone shared this with me. They said, do you know what the definition of vulnerability is? And I was like, no, what is it? And this is what he said. And he said, it's actually a term that comes from battle or like warfare. And when you talk about vulnerability, it is making yourself vulnerable or opening yourself up for attack. And I'm like, damn, that's intense, right? Like vulnerability is actually a term that stems from like warfare, where they would say you're vulnerable to attack, right? You're open for attack. And so vulnerability literally translates to the willingness to be hurt. The willingness to be hurt. And that's something that most of us do not have. And our unwillingness to be hurt is the thing that limits the depth of connection that we can experience in our lives. And so if you are in a situation, as I was talking about earlier, where you're on dating apps or you're dating people and you're going on dates and you feel like every connection you have is boring. You feel like you're not attracting the kind of people you want to attract. You're never feeling the spark with anyone. You're never feeling that excitement, right? If the connections that you're making seem dull and empty and lifeless, or if you're in a relationship and your relationship feels like it has plateaued, or it feels like you're not experiencing what you want to experience in your relationship, you're not experiencing the depth of love and connection and attraction and excitement that you want to feel in your relationship. Like if you are in any of these scenarios, my question for you is, how willing are you to be hurt? And of course, there are boundaries with this, right? Like I know there's a lot of nuance in what I'm saying, and I'm not saying that we should, continually subject ourselves to an abusive situation. I am absolutely not saying that. Actually, sometimes what your vulnerability reveals, when you are willing to go there, when you are willing to open yourself up and expose yourself in that way, sometimes what your vulnerability reveals is that you should no longer be in this relationship. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Like sometimes your vulnerability, your willingness to expose yourself, your willingness to open yourself up to that pain is the very thing that shows you that this is not the right relationship for you. Sometimes you never find that out until you become vulnerable. So I'm not saying that we should just consistently open ourselves up to pain and hurt and trauma and abuse in a relationship. Like, please don't hear me saying that. But I'm saying if you want to connect deeply with other people, if you want to reignite the spark in your relationship, or if you want to have better dates and deeper connections on your dates, you've got to be willing to open yourself up to being hurt. You've got to be willing to feel the potential fallout, the potential pain that may come when you do that. And if you don't want to hear this right now, if this makes you uncomfortable, well, that just shows how thick your barriers are. That just shows how thick your walls are. That just shows how unwilling you are to really be emotionally available for other people. And if that's you, I got a lot of love for you. Like I've been there, as I just shared, right? I've been there, but man, that was a hard way to live. And I want to share something about vulnerability, about the willingness to be hurt, or the willingness to open ourselves up to pain. And there's a line in A Course in Miracles, and some of you who listen to the podcast, you've heard me talk about this before. A Course in Miracles is, I say it's like my Bible, right? It's like when I look for spiritual guidance in life, that's the place I go. That's the way in which I understand and contextualize life. And A Course in Miracles has a line that says, I want to make sure I get it right. I might not be getting this exactly right, but it's something to the effect of, my defensiveness is attacking my invulnerability. My defensiveness is attacking my invulnerability. And here's what that means. It means that to the level that I defend and protect myself, I am actually not understanding how strong and powerful I truly am. Right. So it's funny, like here I am talking about vulnerability, exposing yourself, being available to pain, being willing to experience pain. And A Course in Miracles actually says that you are invulnerable, that nothing can actually hurt you. And so I want to bridge this because I know it might sound like I'm saying conflicting things here, but this is how it all goes together. When you are willing to experience pain, when you are willing to expose yourself and make yourself vulnerable and experience that pain that you've been protecting yourself from, when you open yourself in that way, what happens is your wounds that you have been running from your entire life since childhood, and some of you may not think you have childhood wounds, and like if you're there, if you're in that stage, I understand and I send you a lot of love, but I'm just going to say, like, there's a level of awareness that you have not even tapped into yet if you don't think you have childhood wounds. And those childhood wounds that I was talking about earlier, those have been a thread that have been running through your entire life that you have been protecting yourself from, that you have been hiding from, that you have been tiptoeing through your life, playing small, hiding, protecting yourself, playing it safe, trying to make sure that nothing in the external world touches those wounds, trying to make sure that nothing gets deep enough to hurt you. When you open yourself up and you expose yourself and you become vulnerable, the first thing that's going to happen is those wounds that you have been protecting yourself from your entire life, they are going to get touched. Right? You're going to open yourself up to someone and you're going to say, you know, I'm feeling a lot of attraction. I'm feeling a lot of connection in this relationship. I really like you. Like, I really want to see if this can go somewhere. I really want to see if this can become something real, right? You're going to open yourself up. You're going to expose yourself like that. You're going to make yourself vulnerable to someone in that way. And then what's going to happen is that person maybe, and I'm not saying this is always going to happen, but maybe that person's going to say, you know, I just really don't feel the same way. Or maybe that person's going to say, you know, I don't know if I'm there. I feel like we need to get to know each other better. Or I feel like it's a little bit soon for that. And you're going to feel like, oh, that, like that knife in your heart. And then what's going to happen if you do this consciously, and this is like with the ladies and the men that I coach in my program, this is what I teach them how to work through is like, okay, first step is you've got to open yourself up to experience that knife through the heart. Then when you experience that knife through the heart, then here's what you do next. You recognize that you're not actually reacting to what that person said or what that person did. There's another line in A Course in Miracles that says, I am never upset for the reason I think. Right? I'm never upset for the reason I think. When I understood that, I was like mind blown. Because I thought the rejection or whatever, you know, this person not texting me back, like I thought that was the reason I was upset. What I found out was that person, that rejection, that whatever I felt or whatever I saw in that person that was like the knife through the heart for me. What I realized was that I'm never upset for the reason I think. I'm not upset about what this person said or what this person did. What this person said or what they did is reflecting an existing wound back to me. Something I've been running from my entire life, something I've been hiding from my entire life, a place in my life where I said I would never go because if I go there, it's going to hurt too much. And then the one time I got the courage to be honest with someone about how I felt and they rejected me, it was like that knife through the heart. And then I realized like, oh, this is what I've been running from my whole life. This is what I've been hiding from. This is why I don't feel connected to anybody. This is why I don't feel a depth of connection in my life. It's because I've been protecting myself. I haven't made myself available to people. I haven't made myself emotionally available to people. And so when that wound gets activated, when that person says, you know, I just don't feel the same way, or I'm just not there yet, or I think it's too soon for that, or whatever they say, and you feel like it's that knife through the heart, then what you have the opportunity to do is to start to work with the wounds that you've been running from your entire life. And this is healing. Right? This is how healing actually happens. Healing doesn't happen when you're sitting by yourself in your room alone, reading a book, putting a bunch of ideas in your head, going like, oh, I'm reading about healing. Like, that's not healing. Healing is a transformation that happens in your soul. It's a letting down of the baggage and the heaviness that you've been carrying throughout your life. Healing is something that happens in relationship with other people. Healing does not happen in isolation. Awareness can happen in isolation. You can read a book, and that book can pinpoint the awareness of where your barriers are. Right? You can listen to a podcast, and that podcast can shine a light and show you, oh, I see my barriers now. But the healing does not happen in isolation. The healing happens when you open yourself up in a relationship and you feel the things that you have never been willing to feel before. And as you feel those things that you have never been willing to feel before, you start to learn how to emotionally process all the unprocessed emotions that you've been repressing your entire life. You start to open yourself up to those dark places within yourself. I heard a quote today. I thought this was so powerful. The quote said that everybody wants to live in the light, but you've got to take a walk through the dark first. I was like, boom, that's a powerful quote, right? Like, everybody wants to live in the light, but first you got to take a walk through the dark. Right? If you want to feel that amazing depth of connection and love in a relationship, you've got to first go to all the places that are limiting the ability to connect within yourself. And as you do this, you start to become emotionally available. I want to speak into a nuance here, because a lot of you may think that you're emotionally available when you're actually not. Because when we think of emotional availability, there's like the whole anxious avoidant thing, right? And we tend to think that avoidant people who are on the avoidant side of the spectrum, are not emotionally available. And people who are on the anxious side of the spectrum are emotionally available. Because people on the avoidant side of the spectrum are always kind of withdrawing from love. And people on the anxious side of the spectrum are always kind of reaching out for love. Both are actually examples of emotional unavailability. They're different forms of it. But anxious people are actually, and I mean, we may all have a degree of anxiousness. I'm not saying if you have any degree of anxiousness, you're emotionally unavailable. But people who are in like the extreme, or in an intense version of an anxious attachment style, they are not emotionally available. Because they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're always trying to control and manipulate circumstances to make sure they get what they need in relationships. They're always demanding more from relationships. Like, enough is never enough. So when I talk about emotional availability, I'm not talking about having an anxious attachment style where you're just kind of craving more and more and more all the time. That never enough is not emotionally availability. Actually, we only find true emotional availability when we're secure. Right? True emotional availability happens when we are secure. That's where, because this is the thing. Emotional availability isn't like, I'm emotionally available when I get what I want, and I'm not emotionally available when I don't. No, I'm emotionally available all the time. You know, there's a beautiful story that my wife shares that I want to share today. And I think, you know, because my wife, she was like me, like, did a lot of work on herself before we met. I think the reason that we met and connected and have the relationship we have today, of course, we've done a lot of work in our relationship too, and I'm going to talk about that. But the reason that we were able to connect in the way we connected, the reason our relationship was able to get so deep so fast, the reason that we were able to do that is because of all the work we did on ourselves prior to meeting, right, is because of how emotionally available we had become. So when I met my wife, I was like, I really like you. And she's like, I really like you too. And it was like, do you want to see where this goes? And she's like, yeah. And it's like, awesome. And it was the most easy, effortless relationship I've ever been in. There was no back and forth. There was no drama. There was no guessing. There was no game playing. If we felt like one of us was withdrawing, it was like, hey, it feels like you're withdrawing. And then we would talk about it. Right? Like it was just so easy because we were both emotionally available. But my wife, she shares this story, and I want to share it here because it's such a powerful story. She goes on a date with this guy, and this was a first date on like a blind date on a dating app. She goes on a date with this guy, and she gets to the bar. She's meeting him for a drink, and she gets to the bar, and this guy, she sits down, she orders a drink, and I mean, they have probably exchanged 2 words. Right? Like she walks in, she sits down, she orders her drink. She's like, hi, I'm Fatima. And he's like, hi, I'm so-and-so. And they introduce themselves, and she orders her drink. And then like the next thing he says to her, he goes, you got your free drink. You can go now. Now I know, like, I mean, even for myself, like I know for so many people, like that would be the end of the date right there. It's like, excuse me, like, screw you. Like, who do you think you are? Right? Like, it's so funny how most of us would just have an intense, angry reaction to that. And this is what my wife did. And I think this is such a beautiful example of emotional availability. Such a beautiful example is what my wife said is she goes, excuse me, I'm here to have a good time. And that's what I'm going to do. And when she said that, it completely like took this person off the defensive. And he was like, oh, okay, let's have a good time then. Right. And look, my wife did not choose to go on a second date with him. She never spoke to him again after that night. But you know what they did while they were sitting there having that drink? They had a great time. They had a great time. They connected. They actually found out they had some mutual friends in common. They had done some similar things. They shared stories. They laughed. They had a great time. And it was her willingness when he showed up shut down. He showed up disconnected. He showed up trying to protect himself. And like, let's think about what he said for a moment. He said, you got your free drink. You can go now. Right now, let's look underneath that. Like, what's actually going on for him? If you look into that statement, if you look under the surface of that statement, what is actually going on for him? He probably saw my wife and is like, oh, this woman would never want anything to do with me. I'm not good enough for her. Right? Like this guy, like he immediately went into his unworthiness stuff. He immediately assumed that she wasn't going to like him. He immediately, right? And so he's already on the defensive. He's already protecting himself. And he's like, she's just going to get her free drink and she's just going to go. And my wife could have chosen to play into that, right? She could have chosen to be like, oh, fine. If that's how you feel, I'm going to get my drink and I'm going to go. I'm going to go sit with that guy over there and enjoy it with him, right? She could have been that way. But she said, excuse me, I'm here to have a good time, and that's what I'm going to do. And in that, she gave that man permission to have a good time with her, where before that, he was not open to it. Her emotional availability gave him permission to be available to her. And, you know, she never talked to him again. I don't know how his life turned out from there, but I know this. She made an impact on him that night. And he left that interaction feeling a little bit more worthy than he felt when he showed up. You know, part of this is becoming available to our own vulnerability, right? Part of this is choosing to let myself be vulnerable with others. You know, when my wife said, I'm here to have a good time and that's what I'm going to do, like he could have totally rejected her. He could have been like, who do you think you are? Right? Like, he could have totally rejected her. Like, her willingness to expose herself like that, like, she left herself vulnerable. And part of it is the willingness to open ourselves up. Part of it is the willingness to make ourselves available. The other part of it is the willingness to be present to someone else's vulnerability. You know, so many people, like, I hear this all the time, is like, I show up on dates from dating apps and the people don't look anything like they did in their picture. And I'm like, so what? So you're going to be disconnected because they don't look the way they did in their picture? How about you show up and be connected and be awesome, and maybe you'll have a great time with the person, and maybe the next person will look like they did in their picture. Right? Like, how about you stop being so judgmental of where other people are operating from, and you start paying attention to where you're operating from? Like, truth is, it doesn't matter what that person likes. You're here for a date. You're going to be here for the next hour or so regardless. So you can either choose to show up and be emotionally available and be connected and be your beautiful, amazing self, or you can choose to shut down and be disconnected and be distant and be judgmental. And you know what? It's an hour of your life that you're either choosing to get value with or waste. And the vibration that you choose to embody during that hour is going to set the tone for the next date, and the next date after that, and the next date after that, and the next date after that. So why don't you stop focusing on what's happening with other people? Start focusing on what's happening with you. Start focusing on being the person that you want to be, being your beautiful, amazing, connected self, and having fun in your life and being connected in your life, and like letting that take care of itself. But I understand, and I don't mean to be judgmental when I say that, because I understand where that comes from. And it leads to a kind of depression, because you start going, oh, like, you know, I thought this person looked great on the app, and then I show up and they don't look the way I thought they would. And I was really excited about this. And now it feels like a letdown. And then you start to get in your mind and you go, is this all that's out there? And am I ever going to find what I'm looking for? And if every date turns out like this, like, how am I ever going to find the kind of relationship I'm looking for if this is all I experience? But I totally understand that, and I get that. But here's what you're missing in that. You're missing that it is not up to that person or that date or what they look like to determine what you experience. It is up to you to determine what you experience. And when you get really good at determining what you experience, when you start showing up committed to having a great time, no matter who that person is or what they look like or what they say, you are going to attract higher quality experience, because you will be operating in a higher level of vibration. But every time you go, oh, they don't look the way they did in their picture, can you believe what they said? Or can you believe they tried to have sex with me? Or can you believe, like, on and on and on, just all this stuff that's just constantly bringing you down. You're continuing to equate yourself with that level of experience, and you're continuing to attract that level of experience. And what I want to say is, like, this is a test. This is a test for you. Like, I truly believe this. The universe is testing you to find out if you're worthy of what you want. Are you going to continue to be your beautiful, amazing self and share all of your gifts, even in the face of adversity, even in the face of challenge, even in the face of disappointment? Or are you going to let every little thing throw you off your game? So there's a commitment to being connected. There's a commitment to being connected, right? Like, it's not about who the other person is. It's not about what they do. Even in your relationship, I've been talking a lot about dating. Let me talk about relationships for a moment. Because sometimes we meet someone and there's a spark, right? There's a chemical spark. And I've talked about this in a past podcast, right? There's this evolutionary drive to connect. And when the pheromones are right and the hormones are right, and, there's this burst of connection, there's this electricity, and it feels like, oh my God, I've met my soulmate. No, you haven't met your soulmate. You've met another human being who's igniting a certain reaction in you, and you're igniting a reaction in them. And it's wonderful. I don't mean to downplay it. It's a wonderful thing. There is nothing like that new love. It's beautiful. But I just encourage people to be a little more conscious than thinking that as soon as they feel that, they've met their soulmate, because inevitably that's going to be there for a period of time. And they say the honeymoon phase can last up to like 2 years. Many people, it's more like 6 months. But I mean, there's this kind of momentum we get in the beginning of a relationship where we get this like burst of life and this burst of excitement, and this burst of energy, and the connection comes easily and it feels beautiful. And we feel so in love with the person and they feel so in love with us. And there's all of this happening, right? But then inevitably, if you rely on that, your relationship is going to plateau, because that was like a gift. That was like, you didn't have to work for that. That came easy. You didn't have to consciously create that with another person. You didn't have to bring that much to the table for that, right? That was just given to you. But if you rely on that, you're going to be disillusioned, because that is not meant to last a lifetime. That is meant to have you get together and make some babies and perpetuate the survival of the species. And I hate to be that scientific about it, but it's just the truth. And so what happens is, once that honeymoon phase wears off a little bit, you're facing the same thing that I've been talking about with people who are dating. Right? Where there's this responsibility in you to be connected. People say so many times, it was so good in the beginning. I don't know what happened. Well, here's what happened. The given part of the relationship wore off, and you didn't continue working on it. That's what happened. And look, there are a lot of reasons for this. And I see new parents or even old parents, right? People who have older kids, but like, I see like people who have children, or people who, it's like, it's exhausting sometimes. And like, there's so much work to do, and like just holding your life. Like, I get it that it's a lot sometimes. And the truth is, like, in a long-term committed relationship, in a marriage, in a family, you're not always gonna feel a hot, spicy connection. And that's okay too, right? Like, I don't even want to make it sound like it's bad if you're not feeling that connection all the time. But here's the thing. If you've been with someone for more than a couple of years, and maybe you have kids, or maybe you've been with someone for 10 or 15 years and you have older kids, right? And you've gotten lost in the doingness of your life, and you're taking the kids to soccer practice, and you're cooking dinners, and you're working full-time jobs, and you're tired at night, and there's not time to have sex, and all this different stuff, right? Like, if you find yourself anywhere in this, well, this is what I want to say. If you're not feeling the depth of connection that you want to feel in your relationship, then there is a level of opening yourself up and making yourself vulnerable to your partner that's not that different from what I've been talking about with people who are dating. Right? This is why people who are 15 years in their marriage and they've been disconnected for the last 10 will start dating each other again. And it'll be like they're having a brand new relationship, because they're getting to know each other all over again. Whereas in the last 10 years, they've been so busy with their lives and they haven't been focusing on the relationship. It's like they don't even know who the person is anymore. And then they start dating each other again. They fall in love all over again. And that's a beautiful thing, right? But there's a level of opening yourself up to your partner. And in the same way, if you're 4 or 5 dates in with a person, and it might be time to just open yourself up and vulnerably say to them, like, listen, I really like you. I really like what we've been creating in the last couple of weeks. I feel a strong attraction here. I see a possibility for the future. Like, I would really like to seriously explore where this could go. And I want to know if you want to do the same thing with me. Right? That is an invitation to a deeper connection. And most of us aren't willing to expose ourselves like that. And if you're 15 years into a marriage, or 10 years or 5 years, or even just a couple years, and you're feeling that depth of connection waning, there's a very similar conversation that needs to be had there, where you go to your partner and you say, honey, I don't feel as connected to you as I would like to be. I don't feel as in love with you as I would like to feel. I don't feel like, we have the hot, sexy relationship that we used to have. And I miss that, and I want to be connected to you. And in the same way that as a single person, you might open yourself up for that, and they might say, like, hey, I'm not in the same place, or I don't feel the same way, or I don't know yet. Your partner might say the same thing. That's just the reality of it. Your partner that you've been with for the last 10 years or 2 years, they might say, what are you talking about? We have a fine relationship. My wife was married before me. I'm her second husband. And in her first marriage, she ended up leaving for that very reason. Because she tried to talk to him about deepening their relationship, and he said he wasn't available for it. He said, if you want to go to therapy, you can go to therapy. I'm not going with you. And she said to herself that if my partner will not work with me to create the kind of relationship I want to have, then I just can't be in this relationship. And that's why she left. And I have gone to my wife many times over different phases in the 8 years we've been together. We were long distance for 3 years. Like, many times I went to her during that long distance period and said, I don't feel connected to you. Like, can we do something to get connected? We went from, I shared this on my podcast last week, is we went from being in separate states, in separate lives, long distance for 3 years, to moving into each other 2 months before the pandemic hit, and then being in lockdown together. I mean, talk about from one extreme to the other. And then when we were in lockdown together, we became very disconnected. Because after enjoying and being comfortable in our own space for 3 years and seeing each other for a week or two at a time, we were together 24/7 in lockdown. And we became very disconnected. And we had to find our way back to each other. Many times we've come to each other. I often say to people who are in the early stages with someone, like maybe their boyfriend, girlfriend, and maybe they're just a couple of months in, or maybe they're 6 months in, and they've been in the early stages, and maybe it was really great in the beginning, but then some things are falling off, and they're feeling like, I have certain needs that are not getting met. They don't text me regularly, or they don't call regularly, or we don't spend time together, or I don't feel like I'm getting the attentiveness that I used to get, or any and all of the above. And I often say to people in this situation, well, it's time to be vulnerable with them. It's time to express to them the need that you have. And we judge ourselves for our own needs, right? It's like, honestly, and like, this is true for me. And even as a man, like, a lot of men would be like, what's wrong with you, you freaking wuss? Like, like, a lot of men would say that, but like, this was just true for me. Like, when I was long distance with my wife, and we were, we didn't see each other, we'd see each other maybe once a month or a couple times a month. And we had this big distance between us. Like, it was important for me to text on a daily basis. And we didn't have to, I didn't need her 24/7 attention, but it was just like, I would say good morning and I would want her to respond. And I would wait for her response. And I would love it if, like, we would send each other a selfie throughout the day, or if she would send me a little update about, like, hey, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. right? And I would share with her about what I had going on, right? Like that was something that was important to me. And especially as a man, like it's not comfortable to communicate a need like that. And I know it's not comfortable for women either, right? But I think women, culturally, there tends to be more of an understanding when women need things like that than when men do. But the truth is, we all need things like that. You know, when we are opening ourselves up, when we are developing feelings for someone, when we are falling in love with someone, there's a certain need of reassurance in that. We don't want to feel like we're pouring our heart out to someone who is not reciprocating that. And we all need that from each other. And so if you're dating someone or if you're seeing someone, and look, I don't really care if you've only been on a couple dates with them. Like, it is not too early to be vulnerable with someone. It is not too early to talk about the kind of relationship you want to have. It is not too, I mean, look, if you've been on one date with someone and you're asking them to text you every day, that might be a bit much. I think there's a reasonable standard, you know, but if you've been on 4 or 5 dates with someone and you're starting to develop feelings with them, I think it is totally appropriate to tell them that you're developing feelings, to find out how they feel about you, and to talk about, like, listen, you know, if we're going to continue pursuing this, if we're going to continue exploring this together, I want to know what I can count on from you. I want to know that you're there for it. And so the key to connection, the key to creating deeper connections is your willingness to be vulnerable with people. It's your willingness to ask for what you want and ask for what you need from them. And what I want to say is that it's not about whether or not they agree with it. You know, when my wife went to her first husband and she said, this is not the kind of relationship I want to have, and I want to work on this, and he was unwilling to work on it, she didn't stop being vulnerable in the next relationship after that. Like, you know, she dated a lot of people between him and me. And when she met me, she was totally vulnerable and totally emotionally available, right? She didn't stop being vulnerable and being emotionally available just because her first husband wasn't able to have the kind of relationship she wanted to have. She said, okay, she accepted that. And it wasn't easy. I mean, she went through a real dark night of the soul during that divorce. She really had to go through her own darkness when she left that marriage. And that was a huge pivotal transformation in her life. But she continued bringing that to the next relationship and the next after that. And, you know, for me, like I shared earlier about some trainings I did and some, you know, when I first started practicing vulnerability and opened myself up to that. And I went through a period of years dating people, and I just got really, really comfortable. When I met someone, when I would go on a date with them, you know, like, I mean, I would say after a first date, like if I went on a date with a woman and I had a great time and I really liked her, like I would text her after that first date. I would text her after the first date. And I would just say, you know, like, I really like you. I think you're awesome. I had a great time. I definitely want to see you again. Like, I just got comfortable doing that. And that was scary, right? And I faced rejection a lot. But I didn't stop doing it. I continued doing it with the belief that when I met the right person, that would be reciprocated. And my wife and her life, completely separate from me, continued doing that with the belief that when she met the right person, it would be reciprocated. You see, it wasn't about getting something from someone else. It was about who we chose to be in our lives as we were showing up. It was a stance that said, I have to be authentic. I have to be true to myself. I have to honor my dream. I have to ask for what I want. And I have to believe in my heart that if I want this, there's got to be someone else out there who wants it too. If I want this in a relationship, there's got to be someone else out there who wants it too. And I believe that I can find that person. And anyone who's not available for what I want along the way, it's just not a match. It's just not meant to be. That's the secret to having deeper connection. The willingness to open yourself up, to share how you feel, to ask for what you want, to choose to be connected, even when you're not getting it from other people. And the more you choose that consistently, the more you will attract that in your life. All right, I just want to say thank you to everybody for being with me today. It is always a pleasure to get on and connect and share. I will be back here next Tuesday. Lots of love, everybody. Many blessings, and I'll see you then. Take care. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.